What we need to do now is I'm just going to block in with some blue for his jumper. Well, I quite often do this. I quite often say what I'm about to do, and then just as I go to clean my brush, I notice, hang on a minute, I could use some of that colour on the lips, so let's do that. So let's just get these lips looking a little pinker. Than they currently are. And even though I'm using the same colour for the upper lip, because there's a darker colour underneath, I'm hoping that's going to go on a little bit darker. It's not too bad, it's not too bad. And then what I can do is just look to see if there's anywhere else on the face that I can use this same colour. And I think I can. So I can put some up under the eye there, and perhaps a little bit under the nose. I'm going to just block out that highlight and come back and put it in later. On the under the, or at the top of the nose, I guess, at the brow there, and even on the forehead. Now that I look more closely, perhaps the darker red would be better up there. Oh no, that's a bit too strong, but I've done it now, so for the moment we'll leave that. Okay, now I'm going to just clean my palette and we'll come back to this jumper. All right, palette partially cleaned. So for the jumper, let's grab some of these Silurian blue, and we could almost just start with that actually, but I'm going to add a little bit of the tinting white to the mixture, and let's see what that looks like. Perhaps just a little bit of the alizarin, just so that it's not completely pure blue, and just a touch of the yellow, just so that it's not overly vibrant, because I want the attention on the face, not on the jumper. We'll get some water on the surface of the painting, and well, that's still a fairly bright blue, isn't it? But that's all right to begin with. So we'll sweep this across the lower part of the painting, butting up as carefully as we can to that scarf. Don't want to leave too many of the underlayer showing if I can avoid it, although I can always fill in those little gaps later. Moving across to the shoulder, and so the initial move, so generally speaking the fabric is falling this way, so that's why I'm brushing the paint that way. Then we move on to the other side, similar technique. As mentioned, I'm going to ignore that bit of white shirt that's showing, and we'll sweep down across the shoulder top, and again butt up to the scarf. Right, so we've got some colour in there. Now grab some of the tinting white, mix that into the blue I've already got. I'm working fairly quickly because the paint is still quite moist. I'm hoping that what I'll be able to do is put a little line in there to indicate where the sort of collar part of the jumper ends, and then there's a little bit of a highlight here, and then another one here, and then another one there. But again, I'm not going into, as you can see, I'm not going into a great amount of detail. We'll run a bit of light along the top of the shoulder as well, though. And then on the right side, sorry, a little bit more subdued. Put a few highlights there. And then back to the blue. Although there's still a bit of white on my brush, I'm hoping to be able to get away with this. I'm going to grab a little bit of that kind of brownish red that I had there and mix that into the blue. Don't know how well you can see that. I think my hand is blocking the light, isn't it? There we go. Hopefully you can see that reasonably well. And we'll use that as a shadow colour on this right hand side here. So it's fairly dark down here in the shadow of the scarf. And then just a little bit there to sort of blend things in a touch, and then I'll use that same shadow colour on the left to just pick out a couple of the creases in the jumper. Again, I'm not overly concerned about getting these exactly right. It's just to suggest there's some fabric there. And that will do for the moment. Okay, so before I get to the highlights, I want to put in some of the darkest darks. So when I was painting Nicola last week, the darkest dark I kind of mixed up was a purple. So I'm using just the Silurian blue and some of the alizarin crimson. And let's see how that works. So perhaps it wasn't the darkest dark, but it's one of the darkest darks. So what I'm going to do is try the same thing with Clive. So the right hand side of the hair here is very, very dark. So my purple will essentially be replacing the darkest shadow colour. So I'll put some more of that up into the hair. And I can probably use that on the brows. Or the eyebrows, I should say. And then we'll put a little bit in for an indication of eyelash there. I'm going to need to zoom in on my reference to get eye colour right and everything, but for the moment I'm going to leave the irises as they are. Put a bit of shadow there for the nostril and some for the other one, and then I'll see if I can use the same colour for the open mouth. That's working reasonably well. We've got some very dark shadow here under the right hand side of the chin. I'll just dry brush a bit of that across the front of the chin as well. And then some more deep shadow here. And at the moment I quite like the way these colours are working together, so that's worked out reasonably well. Perhaps a little bit there. And then I can even put a touch here along the edge of the scarf. And we can put a few little creases in the scarf. It's not quite the right colour, but I think it's going to work okay for the painting as a whole. Okay, so that's looking all right, I think. Well, the next thing I've done is I've just taken some of that purple and mixed it into the pale blue that I had here. Picked up a bit of the tinting white and accidentally picked up a bit of the underlying yellow as well. So that's created this kind of grey purple, which is fairly pale. So I'm going to start adding this to the left side of the face to see how that works. And I think, well, it's a bit too dark, I think, at the moment. Difficult to tell. It might be okay. Let's persist for the moment. So there's a bit of a blue tinge to the highlight there. So a little bit of a highlight on the nose. Goes across here. There's some blue, not as much as I'm putting down, but there is some blue on the left hand side of the upper lip there. I'm going to dry brush some over the left side of the face here. A bit of light catching the chin. There's definitely a bit of a blue highlight there on the left side of the neck. Put a bit on the ear. I seem to have lost some of the painting I did on the ear, or it seems that way. Some up here. And perhaps some here, just above the mouth. Left side of the nose. left nostril, just a touch here. A little hint of that same colour there, a bit of reflected light, just the slightest touch down here, a little bit under the eye, and on the eyebrow there. I think I can also put some above this eye on the left. Now I want to go continue with the highlights. I've switched to a smaller 1/2 inch flat brush, and I've just added a little bit of the alizarin to the tinting white. And as you can see, I'm using that on the lower lip. And there's a little bit of that same highlight, which I've put on a rather too generously there, above the upper lip. And let's see if we can use that elsewhere on the face. I don't know that there's too many spots that I can actually. I can perhaps put some on the ear on the left and redo some of that. I don't know what happened to that. Those couple of marks I put down earlier. They seem to have magically disappeared, but nevertheless we can press on. Perhaps a little more under the eye there, above the eye here. A little touch on the bridge of the nose, above that eye, under the left eye. A little touch on the nose there as well. Okay, so having done that, now let's grab some of the cadmium yellow deep and mix that in. And we'll see how this works as another highlight colour. Whoa, okay, so that's perhaps a little too vibrant, but I don't actually mind it. Just a little touch on the scarf there too. And now I need to just soften that a bit by adding some alizarin, just to make it a little more orange. And then I'm hoping I can use, okay, we're starting to get there now, so there's some on the nose. So there are parts of the painting which are still way too dark in tone. And I can just start to lift out some of those subdued highlights with this colour. So I'm definitely going to have to come back and work on the brows in the expression here in a lot more detail. But let's add a bit more red to that. I'm hoping that's going to work a little better for the top of the forehead here than the colour I've currently got. Certainly an improvement, but I don't think it's quite what I want yet. And I'm just mixing that same colour that's on my brush into some of the reddish brown I had before. And I think that's a better colour for up here than the one I had. And there's almost a blue purpley tinge here and here, so I'm gonna mix that up next. Let's go into this dark blue that I had. Grab some of that. And we'll see if we can get a colour which is a little more representative of reality. So it's always kind of a delicate balance. You know, clearly I'm not doing a photorealistic painting here, but at the same time, if you make the colours too wild, it just doesn't look right. So you've got to kind of be inspired by the reference, and at the same time, I don't want to be too scared to deviate from it. Here we go. I can use this colour for these. Start to put this expression in. There's a reddish triangle of shadow above the eyebrow, which I'll put in there in a moment. Bit of dark shadow there under the eyebrow. Okay, let's go back to that red. Get that in there. Oops, that was a mistake. I stopped thinking there for a moment. Put the wrong colour in. Okay, so I've more or less, got down a pretty decent covering of paint over the entire face. So what I'm going to do now, after I've just darkened that bit of fluorescent, or almost fluorescent orange, which seems to be showing through there, is I'm just going to let this dry completely now. And I need to think about the colour of the background as well. But once it's dry, I'm going to come back in with a smaller brush and refine, pretty much the whole thing, just tune in the details. A small filbert brush, and I've mixed up some of the tinting white with some of the cerulean blue, and I'm just going to adjust both the shapes of the whites of the eyes and the colour by adding this in. And if I can, as I do this, I'm going to keep some of the watercolour marker that is still showing through, somewhat frazzled from the application of the water spray and the paint, but I quite like the effect on the line work that's had. So need a little bit of the same colour in the corner of the eye here. And my hope is that there's just going to be a hint of this background colour showing through the colour that I'm applying at the moment. I think that'll be quite a nice effect. I'm going to add a little bit more blue to that mixture. And I'm going to use that now to begin to put some highlights in the eyes. So in my reference, there isn't really much of a distinction between the iris and the pupil in the current lighting. I probably will include some, a distinction. I will include a pupil in the eye, but for now I'm not going to worry too much. And then the left hand highlight is kind of a double highlight in the eye. I'm going to add a bit more of the blue to that to make it just a bit darker. And that's beginning to bring the eyes to life now. Now I need to add a brighter highlight to the eye, so I'm just going to come in next with some pure tinting white. So what I'm going to do is just run a little arc almost horizontally from right to left on the white of the eye there, but I'm going to allow that to continue into the iris on this left eye. And then similar idea on the right hand eye, but I won't go over the edge of the iris. And then while I've got that white on my, oh hang on a sec, okay, I take that back. Before I remove that white from my brush, just going to put another little line of that down here in the corner of the eye on our left. And then I'm going to grab just a tiny amount of the alizarin and mix that thoroughly with the white that's on my brush. And we'll use some of the pink that we've just created either side of that little line of white in the eye, in the corner here. And then I can go a little bit darker by adding a little more of the alizarin. And we'll put just a touch of that in the corner of the other eye. Well, the eyebrows have kind of got a little bit lost in terms of their definition and thickness, so I'm going to pick up some of the alizarin, mix it with some of the cerulean, and add just a touch of the Cad Yellow Deep. I want a bit more of the blue in there as well, and a bit more of the yellow perhaps. Oh, that was way too much. Let's get a bit more red. Bit more of the blue, get some more of the blue, and some more of the blue. Yeah, kind of gone off in the wrong direction here. Okay, getting close to what I want now. All right, so let's correct these eyebrows. So again, I'm going to look, and actually I can use some of this colour to put in a few shadow lines as well. So where the eyelid disappears into the brow, and so just adding, I can use some of this same colour for some of the eyelash as well because it's nice and dark. So let's so I'm really just treating the eyelashes as a line of varying thickness, just looking really closely at the reference to see what's going on. Now, just above the eye here, there's some darker patch of shadow. And then what I can do is look carefully at the distance between this little crease line and where the lower edge of the brow starts. So it comes in around about there. And then it changes angle fairly sharply. I quite like that little bit of broken line I've got there. That wasn't intentional. That's just kind of the way the brush put the paint down. But I'll keep that. A little bit of a gap because the brow gets a little bit lighter. And some of that underlying colour I've got there will work reasonably well. Maybe come up a little touch higher there. And that's starting to get closer to reality. Now, this little frown line comes around here. I've got an indication of that, but it becomes much darker in the centre here than I've got it.